Hello and welcome back. So in the next set of videos, we'll be discussing about a very beautiful concept that is called joins in PostgreSQL. So there are multiple types of joins. One is called the inner join, one is called outer join, and this outer join is further divided into three types, which is left outer join, right outer join, and full outer join. Now, what is typical about a join? Typically, a join involves two tables. And how do we visualize data in these two and come up with one particular view, which will take data from, say, first table and then match it to the second table and then give us report. Now, to explain that, let's, as I mentioned here, is that I've created two tables. One is table 1, named as table 1. Second one is named as table 2. And here, the column 1 is named as table 1. Column 1 as T1C1, T1C2, and T1C3. Similarly, in table 2, we have got T2C1 for column 1, T2C2 for column 2, and T2C3 for column 3. Before we proceed, I'll tell you a slight thing about the values in the tables that we're going to join. If you see in these two tables, there is a column in each one of them that I have highlighted in gray. And if you notice them very clearly or closely, you'll see that the values in T1C3 are also present in T2C1. This is where the concept of join comes into play, where we say that get the values from table 1 and some values from table 2, where the values of table 1 column 3 and table 2 column 1 match. So now the matching happens in multiple different ways. If you see here, this value matches to two records in the column, that is column 1 of table 2. Now, because of these kind of situations, there are multiple ways of matching them. Because if you see, as I showed you earlier, the value D is present in two rows in table 2. Value M is not there in table 2. And similarly, value J, K, and L are not there in table 1. And also you can see that the value, say B or A, is repeated twice in table 1, but it is there only once in table 2. Because of so many permutation combinations, there are the different types of joins that we discussed. So let's start with our tutorial. So to begin with, we'll start with something called the inner join, which is the easiest form of joins that we can have. Before we proceed, I would like to mention here that I have created the same tables in my database. So let me show them to you. Select start from table 1 and I run it. Here you see 13 rows are there and these are the values. Okay, and it starts from T1C1R1 till T1C1R13. Same thing is here, 13 rows, and it starts from T1C1R1 and till all the way till T1C1R13. Same thing goes here. Now let me show you table 2. And here we have 16 records starting from T2C2R1 all the way to T2C2R16. And here again, we have got 16 records starting from T2C2R1 all the way to T2C2R16. I have named these values in a particular way to make them distinct and for us to see the output. The value in any cell here, it tells that this belongs to table 2, that is represented by T2. It belongs to column 2, that is represented by C2, and it is in the 8th row, that is represented by R8. And same thing goes here. So let's proceed with our inner join. Before I write the query, I would explain you what exactly inner join means. In an inner join, what SQL would do is that it will go row by row on table 1 and then on table 2 and then it will check if there is any value that is exactly matching. If some value that is there in table 1 but not in table 2, it will discard those values. And same goes the other way around also. If there's some value that is in table 2 but not in table 1, it will discard them. So let's try to build it out. Now, before building, I would also like to mention that in case of a join query, there are like a couple of things that you need to keep in mind. First thing is that what are the tables that you are joining? Okay, the table names that you are joining. Okay, names that you are joining. Okay, and then what are the fields that you want to pick from each table? Fields to be picked from each table. And the third thing that you need to consider is that what on what column or on what field in table 1 you want to compare with table 2, and also you have to tell the field in the table 2 also. So in this case we are comparing table 1 field 3 or table 1 column 3 with the values of table 2 column 1. So these are the two things that we have to mention here, that I am comparing T1 C3 against T2 C1. If we have all these things in place, then only we can make a join. And on top of it, you can put some filters through the where clause, which we'll be discussing later on. But let's start without the filters here. In this example, we are doing an inner join between table 1 and table 2, and we are picking T1 C1, T1 C2, and T1 C3 from table 1, and T2 C2 and T2 C1 from table 2. How do we, so let me write them down here. T1 C1, T1 C2, and T1 C3. And from table 2, I'm picking up column 1 and column 2. I can pick whatever I want to pick, but I've just shown it here. You can always pick whichever field name you want to pick. Okay. Now that you are doing an inner join, it will go row by row on the table 1 and see if it is present in table 2 or not, and then populate the data. So the first row goes here, that is T1 C1 R1, and it has a value of and A, right? Now A matches with A here in table 2. So it will pick up this value, these T2 C2 and T2 C1, and will show up here. Then with this in from the left table in mind, SQL will compare against all the rows here that how many times does A exist. So in this case, A exists only once. So only one row is there. Now it will pick up B, the second row, and it will check for B. B is present in this table. Again, it is placed only once, so it will copy this and paste it here. It will populate like that. Then it will move on to the third row, which is for T1 C1 R3 and T1 C2 R3 and C, and it will paste it here. And again, it checks the entire table on the right, and C is present only once, so it will pick up these two values and paste. Then comes D. Same thing goes. First pasted once and checked, okay, D is present once here. It is shown. Then it further goes down and checks, and then again D is present again. So in this case, it will pick both the values and populate again. And this thing, it will repeat. This value will repeat again here. Now it would move on to the next row, which is E. So pasted, and E exists here once, and E exists here again. Good. So let me just copy this. Sorry, I pasted it in a wrong manner. And here again, this thing is picked and pasted again. So E gets populated once again, twice. Then it would go to F. It copies this, pastes here. F is present once here, and it is present again here. It pastes again. So F is present again. Then moves on to I. I is present, yes. It copies, pastes. I is present only once. Picks it up, pastes here. Then goes to the next column, M. Is M present? No, M is not present, so it will skip. Then moves on to n. Is n present? No, it isn't. It will skip. Then it moves on to the next row. It says, okay, a again comes, and a is present only once. This value will be picked up, pasted here. Then comes b. B is already present once. B is pasted. Then picks up C. Again, C is present only once. It picks up this value, pastes here. Then picks up D, this last row, and sees that D is present once and twice. So it will do two entries here, one for this record and the other one for the next record. Okay, sorry, this is the second record. So if you see in total, 15 rows are coming here. Let's see it in action in pgadmin. Now in pgadmin, how do I write? So as I mentioned earlier, I want these columns, isn't it? I paste those columns here, and these columns definitely say that, okay, this is from table 1, these 3 are from table 1, and these 2 are from table 2. And also, second thing, that what are the columns on which I'm comparing? Let's check that. I'm comparing on these two, and I paste them here. And of course, I'm picking them from table 1 and table 2, isn't it? So let's check out how the query is written. It is a simple select query where I say select from whatever I want to select, say whatever I am to select, the field names, okay, field 1, field 2, and so on. For ease, let me say this thing, okay. I'm picking these columns from table 1 and then I'm doing an inner join with table 2. So I write inner join with table 2. Let me indent this to make it more readable. I'll delete this. Now SQL will not understand what this means. So we have to tell them that pick this column from the table it belongs to. So I copy this one and I paste it here, and I say from table 1 with a dot, pick the column T1C1. Then from table 1 again with a dot, pick the column T1C2. And similarly from table 1 again with a dot, pick the column T1C3. Now from table 2, you pick T2C1 and you pick T2C2. Let me just remove the unnecessary spaces here and make it look a bit more readable. So now that I've defined that I'm picking these table names or this column names from these two tables, I want to tell SQL that you have to compare these two. So the query for that is that I say compare these two on table 1 dot T1C3 equals to table 2 dot T2C1. This is how we define the query, and it will work. But if I run this right now, it will not work, majorly because of the fact that I have not put the double quotes here. PostgreSQL, I have to put the double quotes on the column names. Depending upon the engine that you're using, you may be using MySQL or MS SQL, and whatever you are using, you can you need to take care of the respective quotes, double quotes here. Let me try to run this and see. If I run it, it is not working, of course. So I have to give these within double quotes. I put them like this, and here if I run these, and here there's no T2, right? I'll copy this table 2 and let me run this. This time if you see, 15 records have come, and in our Excel sheet there are 15 records. Now let's copy those records from the post pgadmin output and then compare them against what we have here. So I click on this cell, this blank thing here, which would select all the rows. Then I copy it by pressing Control C, and I go to my Excel and paste them here. The names are in the same order. If you remember, I've defined them in this order, and SQL takes them in that order itself. If you want to confirm, let's go back and see. Here T1C1, T1C2, T1C3, T2C1, T2C2. And in Excel, T1C1, T1C2, T1C3, T2C1, and T2C2. Right? The columns are the same, isn't it? So if I have to compare these with these, okay, I know that these things, this entire 4 or 5 fields in conjunction would be one unique value, isn't it? I will do some Excel calculations here to show that. And if you are interested in Excel and you want to know more about Excel, then you can always check out the tutorial on Excel. So for this, I'll be using a function called concatenate, and I will concatenate these values. And this becomes my unique value. And I will count the times this same value is repeating in this entire column. I do that, and the value of count, and I would see that each one would be mentioned only once. Let me just put that. Here you see that everything is occurring only once. So each one is unique. Let me do the same thing here. This, comma, this, comma, this, comma, this, comma, this. And I populate it here, and I say is equal to COUNTIF this. I freeze the columns, and then I put it here and submit. And here again, you see that each one is mentioned only once. Now the next thing that we want to check is if this one is present here or not. Most likely what would happen is this is in the same order as we populated, but in case it is not, then we'll be using another Excel function which is called VLOOKUP in a while. Let us first test this out if the order is the same or not. So what I'll do here is I'll just check it. This equals to this. So it occurs, and if you see so many are true, that means these are following the same order, but these things are not following the same order. So let me just delete this one, and let me just check out if this is present here or not. Okay, so I will be using Excel formula called VLOOKUP, where I check this cell's values presence in this column. Okay, and if it is present, then write yes. So if it is present, then just pick up the value here. So you see this is present here. Give me a minute. So if you see all these are present here, let's check it out. Okay, first one is T1C1R1, T1C2R1, AA, and T2C2R1. So T1C1R1, T1C2R1, AA, T2C2R1. So these two match. Okay, now let me just do one thing pretty quickly. I'll copy this entire thing here and paste it as values, and I copy this entire thing here and then paste it here as values. Okay, and then I sort this out. So let me sort it. Sort. Okay, I've sorted this out, and same thing I'll do here, and I sort this out. So since these two are sorted, they're of the same length, that is 15 records there, 15 records there. That means these two should match. So I'll do here this equals to this. Yes, it matches, and yes, all of them match. So this is how inner join works. Thank you for watching.